friends, today I am going to be showing you how to make this super cute crochet and machine knit combo owl hat. This is just such a fun little project to work on. It doesn't take too much time, but it is really fun. It's very simple, and if you have a basic knowledge of crochet, you should have zero problems with this project at all. And if you are not super familiar with crochet, I will walk you through these crocheted portions here step by step. So hopefully you should not have any problems in creating this pattern for yourself. Now, if you do have any questions as you watch the video, feel free to drop them in the comments. I always do my very hardest to respond to any questions that might arise as you are working on a project. I would love to help you troubleshoot to make sure that you can make something that you absolutely love. And I am just so excited to get going on this with you guys. It is tons of fun. Kiddos love it. My kiddos love it. And I am sure that any other little kiddos in your life will love this hat as well. So without too much further ado, let's get into it. All right, so for the hat that I'm making today, I'm using this yarn here. It is Hobby Lobby's I Love This Yarn in Flapper Girl. I have found that my knitting machine absolutely loves this stuff. It works very well with this yarn from Hobby Lobby, so I tend to use it pretty frequently. Never had any issues with it, and it's very nice and soft. To get this started, make sure that you have your row counter zeroed out and just cast on as you normally would. I'm not using waste yarn for this project. If you wanted to use waste yarn, you could, and close your ends that way. I just prefer a different joining method that does not require waste yarn, and so that's what I'm going to be doing today. So I'm just going to cast on as normal. If you've seen my kitty cat hat tutorial, it is the same binding off technique that I use in that tutorial. I just find it really great for flat topped hats, really easy and simple. And once you get past the fiddly bits and get used to it, it's a breeze. So I have that cast on, and I'm using this yarn tensioner that I got on Etsy from Savlabot. I will link that in the description below to be sure. I love this thing. I get perfect tension on my projects every single time, and it's very, very simple to use. You just pop it in there and put it in the tension hole that you need and get to cranking. So I am going to be making this hat in a little kid size, which is going to be 90 rows. And if you wanted to make this in a youth size, big kid size, I would do 100 rows. If you wanted to do it in like an infant toddler size, I would say do 80 rows for that. I've tried all three sizes for this hat, and they fit in those sizes on my kids just right. So I have a 1-year-old, and the 80 row hat fits her really well. I have a 3 and a 4-year-old, and the little kid size hat works perfect for them. And I have an 8-year-old, and the 100 row hat works perfect for her. So if you're wondering row counts for sizing, those are the rows you're looking for. But I'm gonna go for the medium or the little kid size. So I'm gonna crank out 90 rows here, and we will see you when I am done turning this out. All right, so I hit my 90 rows, and I'm just going to start casting off my work here. leaving myself a nice long tail for taking it off of my machine. And I really love these bent metal needles for taking my work off the machine. If you are interested in finding these, I got these on Amazon and I will link that in the description for you. See that little bend on there. All right. So go ahead and start taking this off as you would any other piece that you're not using waste yarn for, by going up through those little V's there, pins, whatever you want to call them, and get the entire thing cast off of your machine. Alright, so now that we have the work off of the machine, I'm going to go ahead and move this machine and show you how we are going to join up these ends and get working on the eyes and the beak. Alright, so now that we have our work off of our machine, I give it just a little stretch as you need to do. And then you are going to reach through and fold up the bottom into the hat and up to the top so your ends are meeting and you have a nice cozy double layered beanie. All the way up to the top here. And then the way that we are going to seam this together is we need to find where our ends meet, and they should be pretty close to each other so long as you haven't twisted your tube at all. There is where our ends are. And now we do need to pull on our ends just a little bit, but you don't want to pull them tight. And you want to be careful and delicate with how you pull them because we are looking to maintain these little loops that go through the string here. And so if you pull the string too tight, you can lose some of those loops and it makes you work harder. So I'm going to start with the inside one. And I'm just going to carefully and gently pull on that end string. And the goal is to get the top of this hat and the string running through the top of this hat to approximately end its tension where it would normally just rest here. So you want this to be the same width as this. And that will eliminate some of the curl, not all of it, but some of it. And then that gives us the right width for sealing off the end of our hat. So I did the interior side, now I need to do the exterior side. Just give it a gentle pull, making sure that it is tensioning all the way around to the other side as well. And that should get us right where we want to be. Now I'm going to go ahead and move my camera in nice and close here and show you how we are going to be closing off the top. Now, you can see I lost one of my loops here a little bit with this one. The yarn is going through it right there, so I'm just going to pull this loop up a little bit so I don't lose that loop right there, or the one next to it, because if you pull on one, it's going to tug on the next one over, so make sure you don't lose your loops. And then I'm going to look at the interior of the hat, because we're going to be alternating back and forth, picking up loops and seaming it that way, and that will close up the top. So I don't want to go straight back through the loop that my outside yarn is currently in, and my outside yarn should be the one that still has my needle attached from taking it off the machine. So I'm going to look for the one next to it, which is right here. And since it's going to be folded this way, I'm going to go from this side through, and then I'm looking for the interior of the hat now. I'm looking for the matching loop on the interior of the hat, which should be this one right here where your yarn is coming out of. And I'm going to pick up that one right there. And then I'm going to pull my needle all the way through both of those loops. Now, we're going to go back and look at the other side. I promise the corners are the fiddliest bit, and once you get through that, the rest of it is pretty smooth sailing. So, you can see here where I just brought it through this loop and through this loop on the interior. So I'm going to look for, drop my little loop down again. This little one that keeps wanting to hide on me. So not this one that we just went through, but the one just behind it. I'm going to pick that one up right there. And I'm going to look on the interior and look for the loop just behind where my yarn is currently coming out of, which is right here. I'm going to pick up that loop, and I'm going to pull through both. Get my orange tail out of the way here. There we go. And then we're going to be alternating all the way down the length of the hat, always doing the exterior wall first and then the interior, and then jumping to the opposite side and doing the exterior wall first and then the interior wall on the other side, picking up those loops back and forth until we're all the way down. So back to this side, my next loop that has no yarn coming through it, because you can see it has yarn coming through these loops over here. So I want to do exterior wall first, so I'm going to pick this loop up here. And the next one on the interior, which is this one right here, and pull through both of those. And then look on the other side for your next loop, which for me is hiding a little bit again. But I don't know if you can see it. It's right here. It's this right here. It's hiding just a little bit, got tucked in a little bit, but I want to pick that one up. And then look for my next interior one, which is going to be this one right here. Pick that one up, pull through both, and then keep doing that. And I'll keep doing this for a little bit, and then I'll show you what it looks like when you start to snug it tight, because you can see how it's going to seam all of this together. So exterior first, then interior, which is a little bit snug and hiding. And like I said, if you don't want to do this kind of seaming on your top, you can for sure use waste yarn while you're making your hat, and then close your top however you choose to. This is just how I prefer to do it. So my next loop is going to be right here. I'm going to pick that one up on the exterior first, and then my interior loop right there. I think I have enough stitches now that I can show you. You can see how it's getting sewn together. I'm going to pinch my corner, and I'm just going to pull this yarn tight. And you can see how it just closes that seam right up there. And it'll make a nice even close, straight and flat all the way across. So I'm going to keep working on that. And I will meet you when we get to the other corner, which is a little bit fiddly too. But I'll meet you over there. So I'm nearing the end into this corner here. You want to make sure that you don't lose your interior layer while you are finishing this up. And don't tighten this down like I've tightened it down over here, but don't tug this tight yet because you want to have a little bit of room to work in the end. So just keep going back and forth with your loops and do your best to keep an eye on them so you don't lose track of any of them, because otherwise, especially on the inside layer, it is easy to lose track of where you are, how many loops you have left, and where exactly they wind up at. So I'm just sewing it very, very loosely until I get my last couple of loops here. These are my last two. This one and this one. And now that I have all of my loops picked up, I'm going to go ahead and give this a tug and have all of those stitches come together. And now the top of my hat is beautifully joined together. And this is what it looks like here. Sorry if you hear my daughter crying in the other room. My husband's with her. She is just fine, I am sure. She likes to draw on my wall, so I'm guessing that she was drawing in a notebook because my husband gave her a notebook to doodle in. He took the pen away. That's my guess. All right. So I am going to stick my needle back down here just a little bit along the top until I get partway through or partway over to where I want to be, which is right about here. And I'm just going to put one stitch right here to kind of give a little bit of definition to make kind of owly ears so that when the hat is put on, those kind of pop out a little bit. Not a ton, not like the kitty cat hat that I have and have done a tutorial for, but just a little bit so that they kind of pop out. So I'm going to go straight down from here, straight down from right about here and go down into there. So that's kind of where I'm looking for my needle to pop out, right about there. Now I just eyeball it. If you actually want to measure it, you can, but I just eyeball it. And then I'm going to go diagonal, so I'm going to go down about 3 stitches. I'm going to go over about 3 stitches and pop in right there. And don't tug it down super tight on that first one, otherwise you'll get it pulled down right here and you don't want that. But you do want to make sure that you come up back in the exact same spot, and now you can give that more of a snug down. Alright, I apologize. My video cut out, or my battery cut out on my camera there, so sorry if there was a funny gap there for a second. I was in the process of showing you how to finish up this part right here. I had just done one on this side, one on this side. I'm going to go back through. So I have 2 loops through coming both directions. And then I'm just going to feed this into the inside of the hat. Do a little knot. Just like that. And while I have my needle threaded, I'm just going to feed this into the inside of that doubled up fabric. Just like that, and then I'll come back and trim that in a minute. Now you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I just use this other tail here to do the other side. So you have both of your owl ears how you want them. So since I showed you the first one, I'm not going to show you the second one. They're just exactly the same. Just make sure that when you do it, that you are keeping things as even as possible. So just kind of, if you want to eyeball it, again, you can. If you want to measure it, you can. I usually just eyeball it and it usually turns out fine. But when you have this here, you can kind of just look straight across. And so, okay, it needs to start on the same row here at least. So you have your height correct. And then, unthreaded my needle, go on through and finish up this side. So I'm going to do this side here quick, and then I will show you how to get the face stitch done. So to get started on the eye portion, I'm using linen. I love this yarn from Hobby Lobby. You can use whatever white or light colored or ultimately any colored yarn that you want for this, but that is what I am using today. And you're going to need a crochet hook. I'm using a 6mm today, but you can easily go down to a 5.5 with this 4-weight yarn if you choose to. Let me get my lighting fixed here. There we go. And you're going to start by making a slip knot and putting it onto your hook. And then you're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then slip stitch back into that first chain that you made in order to form a little loop. Yarn over and pull through everything right there. And now you are going to chain 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to wind up doing a total of 11 double crochet stitches into the little loop that we just created right here. And that will complete our first round, our first circle for our eye. So find the center of the loop that you just created out of those chain stitches. And that's where you're going to be working all of your double crochet stitches into. So you're going to do a total of 11, and then including the chain 3 that we just did, which will count as a double crochet, that will make for a total of 12 stitches all the way around. So yarn over, poke through the center, grab your yarn and pull it up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then keep doing that. Yarn over into the center, grab your yarn and pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and do a total of 11 double crochet stitches, and I'll meet you at the end of the round. I just finished my 11th double crochet, and now I'm going to find my 3rd chain up here that we did for getting started. 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to do a slip stitch into that top chain stitch just to join my round and snug down that stitch right there. And then I'm going to do another chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and then yarn over, and you're going to do a double crochet in that same slip stitch that you just joined into. So find that slip stitch hole right there. All right, and do one more double crochet into that slip stitch hole. And that starts, counts as our starting increase right here, and we're going to do increase stitches in every stitch all the way around. So 2 double crochets in each stitch all the way around on this round. So yarn over, find your next stitch, and do your first double crochet. And then yarn over and do another double crochet into that same stitch. And do that in every single stitch all the way around. So 2 double crochet stitches in every stitch all the way around, and I will meet you at the end of this round. So I just finished doing all my increase stitches all the way around, and now I'm going to do the same as I did on the last round. I'm going to find that top stitch in my chain 3 right here. I'm going to slip stitch to join right in there. Snug that stitch down. Now go ahead and chain 2, and for this last round on the white portion of the eye, we're going to do single crochets, and I will show you the increase pattern for that. So instead of doing 1 and then an increase and then 1 and then an increase, we're actually going to do 2 and then an increase. So this first chain 2 counts as our first single crochet stitch here. So find the next stitch and do a single crochet right into that stitch. And then the next stitch that you go into is going to be an increase. So 2 single crochet stitches into the next stitch. 1, 2, and then 1 single crochet stitch into the next 2 stitches as normal. And then do an increase with 2 single crochet stitches into the next stitch. And keep that pattern of 2 single crochet and a single crochet increase all the way around until you get to the end of the round, and I'll meet you right back over here. So I just finished my third round, which was all single crochet in that 2 single crochet and an increase pattern all the way around. And then find the top of this chain stitch, which was a chain 2, and slip stitch to join into the top of that stitch. Snug that down. Chain 1, and leave yourself a very nice long tail because you're going to use that tail for sewing your eyes onto your piece. Cut your yarn and pull that all the way through and snug that down. And that is the first portion of your eye completed. Now we will go on to the interior color portion of our eye. So I'm going to be using this green color today. This is Softly Baby yarn. I think the color is baby green. I can't remember what they call it. But this is the yarn that I'm going to be using today. And I am going to just start with a slip stitch, just like I did with the other portion of the eye. And we're going to start this colored portion of the eye the exact same way that we did with the other white color portion of the eye. You're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, slip stitch to join in that first chain, and then chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then do a total of 11 double crochet stitches into the center loop that you just created with your chain stitches, so that with the chain 3 counting as a double crochet, you should have a total of 12 stitches all the way around to form a circle. So go ahead and do that, and then I will show you what our second round is going to be. All right, I did my total of 11 double crochet stitches, so I have a total of 12 stitches with this chain 3 counting as our first. I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 right there. Snug that down, and then we are going to do a row of single crochet. So chain 2, 1, 2. You do not need to go into this chain that you just slip stitched into. We are actually going to go into the next double crochet stitch right here and do an increase right off the bat. So 2 single crochet into that first double crochet stitch, and then 1 single crochet, and then a single crochet increase, and then 1 single crochet, and a single crochet increase. So 2 single crochets on the same stitch, and keep doing that pattern of single crochet and an increase, single crochet and an increase all the way around until you get to here. All right, so we finished our row of single crochet. Find the top of your chain 2 and slip stitch to join. Snug that join down a little bit. Yarn over to make the chain, leaving yourself a long tail again for sewing, and pull all the way through that chain stitch and snug that down. And now you have both portions of your eyes And we're going to have it so our tails are going to stay close together to make the eye offset. And then we're going to start stitching this down together just like this. And I will go ahead and show you how to do that part next. Now I am using these 15mm shank button eyes to do the center of my pupil on the eye. You can see the little hole on there for sewing. That is what it looks like. Instead of a safety button eye, this is a shank button eye. And I'm going to sew that right into the center of the colored portion of our eye so that it'll look just like that. And these are very, very secure. I do not envision any child being able to rip these off at all. They are extremely secure. And I don't believe pose any kind of choking hazard or threat at all. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this onto here. Now I'm actually going to take my first tail and just trim it shorter so it's out of the way, because this will just be hidden underneath as we sew. So you can just trim that one short. You don't have to worry about weaving that one in. Yay, a tail we don't have to weave in, right? So now that I have this connected to my needle is connected to my very long tail, I'm going to just weave the yarn back up towards the center here, kind of hiding it in. And then you can see on the back side where this is poking out, that little hole on the button. So I'm just going to poke my needle through there. Careful not to pull too tight on my yarn because I don't want this side to here to pucker. And then just go straight through on the other side. Go up on the other side again. So our yarn came out on this side, we're going to put it in through here, poke it through that button, and back up on the other side. And I just loop it through 3 times. I think that that's plenty secure, and I tighten it down quite a bit. Once I get that first loop through, I get a good snug down so it is nice and firm and secure. There's 2 loops through and 3 loops through. And now these shank button eyes, they have very big holes. Obviously you can see I'm not having any issue passing my yarn needle through that has the giant eye on it. And these are great. I've really liked these shank buttons. I will put the link for them in the description below. Just found them on Amazon if you want to get some of these for yourself. And I think I said already, but I use the 15mm size for this. So now that I have that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to need my white portion here. And again, just like I did with the other one, whoop, got a hair in there. Of course I did. It's not a crochet project if it didn't get a little piece of hair in there somewhere, right? So I'm going to go ahead and trim this interior tail very short, just like I did with the one on the green one. And then you just kind of have to keep this long white tail out of the way because we're actually not using the long white tail here. We're going to keep our needle threaded on our long green tail. And we need to weave our needle back towards the outside edge. Now I have woven it back towards the stitch that I ended on, where that chain stitch was. So it's coming out the same place that I knotted it, or very close to it. That's just me being a bit of a persnickety about it. I want my stitches, like my tails, to line up here, but you can ultimately, as long as you're on the edge, you're good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this so that I still get this white edge of stitches on the outside, but it's going to be very close, so it's going to nestle right in there. And then I'm going to sew all the way around it to get this eye down. Now, I sew the eye, once it's fully assembled, onto the hat differently than I sew the interior portion of the eye on. And that's because this just makes it lay a little bit flatter. And I like the way that it looks better. So I'm going to show you two different ways to sew things. But this is how I sew the eye, and then I sew slightly differently when I sew the white portion on. But I'll just show you this part. For now, we are going to go ahead and just start sewing this on. And I like to come up right in the middle of the top of a stitch and then poke it right back down, tucking my needle just slightly inwards towards the inside, so it tucks under just a little bit when I tighten it down. And I don't pull super tight because it doesn't really need to be super tight, and if you pull super tight, that'll start to pucker your work, and there just isn't any need for that. So just, what is this, a whip stitch? I don't remember what stitches are called. I think that this is a whip stitch. So just go ahead and whip stitch this all the way around to get the green portion of the eye attached to the white portion of the eye. And then I will meet you back around at the other end. And you can see it gives it, it tightens it down. It doesn't look too obvious where the stitching is. And it just makes it lay very flat up against this white portion here. I like the white portion to be raised slightly up against off the hat. This I want to be nice and snug down. So continue to do that all the way around. Alright, so I finished off my second eye. I did my knot and I slid my yarn in there and trimmed it, and now I have my two eyes ready to go. And what I am actually going to do is I'm going to sew them together. So it doesn't matter which side, but grab one of your extra long tails and thread your needle. And then I am excuse me, I'm planning on putting my eyes centered like this, but you can always do it differently. If you want them to go this way, you can put them that way and sew them together there. If you want to have crazy owl eyes, you can kind of flip them around and do them really goofy like that. You can ultimately do whatever you want to, but I'm going to have mine sewn together like that. And the reason why we're sewing our eyes together is so that when the hat stretches and pulls, these eyes don't pull apart, and then you wind up having eyes that kind of go wonky like that. So we don't want that, so we're going to go ahead and stitch this together. And I have a nice way of aligning it because my tails are coming together in the same place. And so I just sew up from this right here, and I'm just going to whip stitch these eyes together over a couple of stitches up and down. And that will do enough to keep things all in alignment. So we should not have any wonky eyes separating and going wrong direction. So now that I've done a couple stitches towards down, I'm going to slide my needle up through those stitches that I just did, so I am back over here on the other side. Get this long tail out of the way. And then just stitch a couple of stitches up this direction. Aha, my tail got caught. Get that tail out of there. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and do one more stitch. up just a bit. And that is stitched together. And to get rid of this tail, I'm going to go back through just like I did the other way until I'm kind of in the middle, poking through on that side. Getting that all tight and snug down in there. And then I'm going to actually weave my end in towards the middle of one of the eyes. It does not matter which eye it is. And then I'm going to do a little knot to secure it. Just like that. And because this tail is going to be hidden as I sew the eye on, I'm just going to give that one a trim. And now I just have one long tail left, which is what I'm going to use to actually stitch the eyes onto the owl. So I will show you that, but first we have to show how to do the beak, and then we will get to stitching this whole thing assembled onto our hat. All right, onto the nose beak portion of our hat. This yarn is I Love This Yarn from Hobby Lobby in the color Mustard. And you're going to start by making a slip knot. Slide that on your hook. And then you're going to do a total of 8 chains. 1, 2, 3, and I'll say make these a little bit loose. Okay, so don't do them real tight. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now we're going to be working into these back bumps on the back of our chain. We're not going to be working into the stitches here, the V's. We're going to be working into the back bump. So just keep that in mind as we go. And you're going to skip that first bump. So not this one right here, but you're going to put your hook through the second one right here. And you're just going to do a slip stitch. Into that first one. And then the second one you're going to do a single crochet. So hook in, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And then in the next one you are going to do a double crochet. So yarn over, hook through the bump, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And you can see how it's starting to create this V shape going out here. Do another double crochet into the next bump there, and then into the last 3 stitches you're going to do treble crochets or triple crochets. So yarn over twice, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. So yarn over twice, through the bump, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then do one more of those stitches into that last stitch bump there. And then I will show you what I do to kind of make sure that this has a really, I just like the finish of it when it's just a little bit more rounded down here. And the best way that I've found to do that is just by doing slip stitches all along this edge and background here. So just turn your work. You don't need to chain one to turn or anything like that, just turn your work. Slip stitch into that first stitch and into every stitch all the way around, and it kind of rounds off slightly the end of the beak and just makes it a little bit wider, and I just personally like the look of it a little bit better. So once you've done that whole edge on the one side, just kind of get it into that end point there, which can be a little tricky. It's usually a little tight. And slip stitch there, and then down every stitch along the other side. And because we worked into the bumps on our chain instead of into the main stitches, both sides of the nose should have a very uniform look to them. There shouldn't be any difference in how either side of the nose looks. So that is the beak all finished up, and you can see how it kind of rounded out the edge and made the edges just a little bit thicker. Makes these actually kind of come together. They're less likely to pull apart and split because the sides are just a little bit more rigid. And then just chain one, leave a nice long tail for sewing, trim your yarn, and pull that all the way through. Now all that is left to do is to take our eyes and our beak and get everything all sewn onto our hat. And then you will just have the tassels on the ears left, and we will be all done. All right, so we've gotten both of our little ear stitches here taken care of, and now we are on to the portion where we need to start sewing on the face of this hat. Now what you want to do is you want to start with the nose, and I use a stitch marker here just to make sure that the point of my nose stays centered as I'm sewing on. So again, I just kind of eyeball this, and I haven't had an issue with it. Make sure the correct side is facing up there. I had the wrong side facing up. So I'm going to just kind of center that and set it so it looks just about centered. And then I'm going to look at what row that comes into and kind of the location that I want that point to go. And I'm going to take one of my stitch markers and just put that in right there to give me a point of reference. Now, if you want to actually pin this, you can. I just find that they get in the way for me because I wind up being done with them so quickly. But you want to use your long tail. So I have a long tail and a short tail here. You obviously want to use your long tail for sewing in. And the way that I'm going to sew this on, we actually don't need to worry about sewing this top portion on here. You can if you want to. I just don't worry about it because when we sew on the eyes, they are actually going to overlap this. And so that top portion will naturally just get stitched down a little bit right there. So just saves me a little bit of sewing. And the way that I sew this on, like I said, I'm not one to really pin things because I feel like it goes so quickly. I just lay it on a nice flat surface. I have it exactly where I want it. I just poke my needle straight through, reach through in between, and then pull it all the way through. And it's okay if my nose point here goes crooked because I have my stitch marker there to keep me on track. And then when I stitch, I just do a running stitch up through the tops of these stitches, and then you don't even really see it get stitched down. Like the yarn kind of just hides in that line there, and so it doesn't really show up at all. So when I have it through, I just feel for where my next stitch is going to come up. and poke it up right where I want it. Right there. And then just go down through the next one. And since it's laying nice and flat, like I said, I don't need to have it pinned at all. And as long as you just keep track of what you're doing and making sure that it stays nice and centered, you shouldn't have an issue with your positioning. So I'm going to do that running stitch all the way down to the point here, all the way back up, and I will meet you back when I'm done with that, and I will show you how we're going to get the eye stitch done. Alright, so I just completed my running stitch here and here. Last thing that I need to do is just finish this off. I'm going to have my needle cup up on the top of my work there and just do one stitch over just to make sure that even though I'm not sewing along this top edge, that it's still tacked down nicely. Just like that. Flip your work inside out. Do a little stitch on the inside, or a knot, excuse me, not a stitch. Tighten that down. And then I just weave my end in underneath the nose through the fabric. So it's nice and hidden. I usually go back just one time to make sure that that's not going to pull loose. Trim that off. And then I'm going to sew this end in right here, and that's how I finish the nose. And then we will get to the eyes. Alright, so my nose is sewn on. I can take my stitch marker out here. It served its purpose. It kept me straight and aligned. And you can kind of see from the positioning, if I don't catch my yarn here, oh goodness, there we go. You can kind of see from the positioning that I keep the nose within an inch or two of the bottom, just because I feel like that way you give enough room for the eyes. And even on the smaller or larger size hats, just keeping that face closer to the bottom kind of makes it so it's more visible when the child wears the hat, or the adult if you're making an adult size, and so you don't miss the face of the owl itself. So here are my eyes, and the way that I'm going to have these go is that this top corner right here is going to be right aligned with the top of the nose right there. So we have overlapping a little bit here in the corners, and I think that that looks really nice. So that gives it a really good position, keeps things nice and centered, and still allows that beak to come down, I feel like, a correct amount. So I'm going to thread my needle here. Now obviously my yarn right now, because this is a tail and we had our tails meet in the middle, is just poking out of the top. I'm just going to feed this through those stitches that we did previously. And then we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the nose. As far as doing a running stitch to attach this, we're just going to work it all the way around the edge here with the running stitch, and then continuing around this side so it meets right back here. And that's how you're going to do it. So when you do the running stitch, if it was not clear before, you just kind of go like this, obviously poking through the fabric. But that's how it's going to work when you're doing your running stitch around the eyes. You pick one up, you go over one, you pick one up, you go over one. And you're going to do that all the way around. And again, I like to not pin things. Say I live dangerously in that way, but that's just how I roll. So I just lay my work flat and take my time to make sure that things are lining up correctly while I'm stitching. And because it's on a nice flat surface, if I need to adjust at all, I can do that while I am sewing on. And because I like things to be nice and straight, I just take my time here. Sewing, I feel like sewing anything on is the least convenient thing when it comes to finishing off a project. But if you take the time to do it well, it really gives that nice professional finish and just really makes things look nice. So just continue to do that running stitch, checking the position of the eyes, and being careful with where your needle is coming out so you don't accidentally have an eye that starts to droop down or something like that as you go. And I am going to work my way all the way around and meet you right back here, and then I will show you how to finish off the top tassels right here, and then we will be done. Yay! Alright, so I just finished getting my running stitch done all the way around, and these are attached nice and snug. Looks nice and centered with the nose there. And I'm just going to bring this tail to the inside of the hat, do a tiny little knot, and then weave in my end into the fabric behind the eye here. And then that portion is all done. And now the only thing that we have left are the ear tassels, and we'll be finished. So I'm going to use this yarn here. I think that it matches up nicely with that pink right there, and I think that I'll just give a fun contrast to the little ear tassels. So the way that I'm going to do this is I want to measure out equal sections of yarn for my tassel, and I'm going to be doing for each tassel about a total of 6 strands coming out the end, so that comes to 3. 1, 2, 3 for each side. So I'm going to do a total of 6. So I have everything cut that I need for both sides, and I don't have to cut again. And now if they're not perfectly even, it's not the end of the world, because you can trim them to length as long as you leave yourself enough that it's not going to be on the short side. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which should be enough for each side here. Trim your ends so you don't have any loops. And then divide these in half. So 3 and 3. Now set 3 of those aside, and you have 3 here. Grab another length of yarn that is going to be going across here. Now if you're unfamiliar with making a tassel, here's a little mini tutorial for you. If you are familiar with making a tassel, you can probably skip this, but I'm just going to show you how I do mine. So have this single strand going vertically, the other strands going horizontally. Tie this in a double knot. 1 and 2. Fold one side over the other so that you have your little ends coming out the side here. So you should have a total of 6 strands going this way, 2 strands going that way. Trim yourself another little length of yarn, and then put that right underneath there, very near the knot, because you're going to take this and do a double knot right up here, close to the very top. You can kind of scooch it up a little bit. I usually do. Okay. There we go. So make sure that you have that double knotted, just like that. And I grab my yarn needle and I'm going to weave in the ends that I just did this vertical knot with, and by weaving in I mean just poking through the top of where you just did and pulling it down so that they become part of the tassel end and they don't stick out funny at all. There we go. One more end to get tucked in here. And run it right through the top of the tassel and down into it. And pull that tight. Now, if you want any further instruction on that, I'm sure that there are other tutorials on making tassels. That's just a quick overview. I'm just going to trim this right about here. And here are my ends for tying the tassel on. I'm going to make one more tassel exactly the same way that I just made this one, and then I will show you how I tie them on, and then we will be all done. All right, finishing touches. You are very nearly there. I have my 2 tassels here. I have one of my top ends already threaded on my needle. I'm going to look for the corner of my hat, kind of stick my finger up in there, and I'm going to poke it through down on one side, all the way through until it falls off my needle, and then I'm going to thread the other side. Poke my finger back up into the hat, look for a different place because you want it to be able to tie it off inside, so don't stick it in the same spot. Stick it in on the other side of the corner there. Pull it all the way through until it falls right off your needle. Turn your hat inside out. Grab your 2 tails here. Pull up until you have that corner kind of pulled out. Give it a double knot. 1 and 2. Nice and snug. Trim those ends short because they'll tuck right into the ear there. And you have your first tassel secured and tied on. Now you just have one more to go. Now I hope that this was helpful for you guys and you have everything that you need to complete this hat from start to finish. I feel like this was a bit longer of a tutorial just because there was a fair amount of crochet work and attaching on and just a lot of different elements, but I hope that you were able to watch this from start to finish and really get a good idea of how to recreate this on your own for yourself or for some children in your life or whomever. I just love this hat pattern. I think it's tons of fun, and my kiddos certainly have absolutely loved it. They wear them almost every day now that it's in the 30s during the day, and this has become a favorite hat around our household. Now, if you have not already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and give this video a like. Those likes actually go a very, very long way in telling YouTube that this video is worth the time to promote on other people's pages. So if you would go and like this video, I would greatly appreciate it. But in the meantime, there is our finished little owl hat. And it is such a fun, cute little owly fun project. And even with all of the crochet work and the sewing on, it still works up pretty quickly and is just a really great project to have. So thank you so very much for hanging in there with me through this entire project. I hope that you really enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, Yarny friends. Bye-bye.